The wind howled through the empty streets of a small Texas town as David closed the curtains in his modest living room. The storm had been raging for hours, rattling the windows and flickering the lights. He glanced at the clock, almost 9 p.m., and knew it was time to tuck his little daughter, Lily, into bed. The rain was coming down in heavy sheets, hitting the roof like an endless drumbeat. David carried a steaming mug of cocoa for Lily, trying to keep the evening warm and safe despite the chaos outside. The old heater hummed in the background, fighting against the cold that was creeping in through every crack in the walls. He stepped into Lily's room and found her curled up under the blankets, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. She smiled sleepily as he placed the cocoa on the nightstand. "Is the storm going to blow our house away, Daddy?" she whispered. He knelt beside her, brushing back her hair, and assured her that their little home was strong enough to handle anything. Outside, the wind screamed louder, and the power flickered again. He kissed her forehead and told her to close her eyes, humming a soft tune to distract her from the storm's fury. It was moments like this that reminded him how precious his role as a father was. Just as he stepped into the hallway, a deep rumble of thunder shook the house, followed by the loudest knock he had ever heard. It startled him. Visitors were rare at this hour, especially in weather like this. For a moment, he wondered if it was a neighbor in trouble or some stranger stranded in the storm. The knock came again, louder and more urgent, as if someone was desperate. David hurried to the door, his heart racing, the sound of rain pounding on the roof growing almost deafening. He pulled his jacket tight before unlocking the door. When he opened it, the wind nearly tore the door from his hand. Standing in the doorway was a woman, drenched from head to toe, holding the hand of a little boy who looked about Lily's age. Her coat clung to her, water dripping onto the porch. Her face was pale, her hair plastered to her forehead. "I'm so sorry," she began, her voice shaking from the cold, "but my car broke down the road. My son and we have nowhere to go." David's eyes widened in recognition. This was Emily Carter, the CEO of the company he worked for. For a second, he didn't know how to react. He had seen her only in business meetings and company newsletters, always poised and confident, not like this, shivering, soaked, and clearly exhausted. The little boy clung to her side, his eyes wide with fear. David stepped aside instantly. "Come in, quickly," he said, pulling them into the warm living room. Emily murmured her thanks, her teeth chattering as the boy shivered in his damp sweater. David shut the door behind them, shutting out the wind's roar. The heater hummed in the corner, but the cold in their clothes made Emily and her son tremble. David grabbed 2 dry towels from the hallway and handed them over. "You both must be freezing," he said, guiding them toward the couch. He ran to the kitchen, filling a kettle with water to make tea. As he worked, he could hear the boy's small voice asking his mother if they were safe now. Her voice was soft but tired as she reassured him. David returned with 2 steaming mugs and placed them in their hands. Emily explained between sips of tea that they had been driving back from visiting her sister when the car's engine died. With no one answering the phone at the nearest tow company and the storm worsening, she decided to walk for help. They had been in the cold rain for nearly half an hour before finding his house. David shook his head in disbelief. No one should have been out in weather like this. "You're lucky you found us," he said. "There's no telling how bad it could have gotten." Lily peeked out from her room, curious about the new voices. David called her over and introduced her to Emily and her son, Jacob. The 2 children stared at each other shyly before smiling, as if sensing they were both caught in the same unexpected adventure. David handed Lily one of the extra blankets, and she draped it around Jacob's shoulders without a word. The room felt warmer instantly. Not just from the heater, but from the kindness that was passing between them. After making sure the children were settled, David found a set of old clothes in the closet that might fit Emily. She was hesitant at first, clearly unused to accepting help, but the cold convinced her to accept. When she emerged from the bathroom in the oversized sweater and sweatpants, she looked more relaxed, though her eyes still carried the weight of the night's ordeal. "I can't thank you enough," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." David simply replied, "No one should face a storm alone." The hours passed slowly as the storm continued to pound the town. The four of them sat together in the living room, sharing snacks and warm drinks. The kids eventually fell asleep, their heads resting on the couch cushions. Emily watched them for a long moment, her expression softening. "It's been a long time since I've seen Jacob this calm," she admitted. David nodded, understanding all too well how hard single parenthood could be. They spoke quietly, their voices nearly drowned by the rain, but in that small living room, the chaos outside seemed far away. By midnight, the storm showed no sign of stopping, so David set up the guest room for Emily and Jacob. He gave them extra blankets and a small lamp, wanting them to feel safe and comfortable. Emily thanked him again, her voice heavy with exhaustion. When David finally lay down in his own bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the strange twist of fate. A powerful CEO stranded in a storm, finding shelter in the home of one of her employees. It felt like something out of a movie, but it was real, and it had brought two very different lives together under one roof. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, revealing the aftermath of the storm, branches scattered across the street, puddles glistening in the yard, and the distant hum of cleanup crews. David woke early, quietly moving around so as not to disturb the guests sleeping in the guest room. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the small space. As he set out toast and fruit, he thought about the strange events of the night before. He still couldn't quite believe that Emily Carter, his CEO, had spent the night under his roof. The sound of soft footsteps drew his attention, and he turned to see Emily, dressed in the clothes he had given her, looking far more rested. She smiled faintly, clearly still adjusting to the situation. "I can't remember the last time I slept this well," she admitted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. David chuckled and told her it must be the storm's lullaby. Soon, Jacob appeared, followed by Lily, both children looking refreshed and curious. Breakfast was a relaxed affair, the kind of morning where conversation flowed easily despite the unusual circumstances. Emily seemed different from the commanding figure David knew at work, more open, more human, and less guarded. The children's laughter seemed to draw her out even more, and she joined in their playful banter without hesitation. As the day went on, the storm clouds gave way to clearer skies, but the roads were still wet and partially blocked by fallen branches. Emily received a call from the tow truck company, informing her it would take another day before they could retrieve her car. She hesitated before telling David, clearly worried about overstaying her welcome. But David quickly dismissed her concern, insisting she and Jacob stay until it was safe to travel. "You don't need to rush out there just to sit in some motel room," he said. "You're welcome here as long as you need." She seemed both relieved and touched by his sincerity. The unexpected extra day turned into a slow, peaceful time for both families. The children built blanket forts in the living room, giggling as they turned the couch into a castle. Emily helped David in the kitchen, where she surprised him by revealing she enjoyed cooking but rarely had time for it. As they prepared lunch together, they talked about their lives beyond work. About parenting struggles, late nights worrying about bills, and the unspoken loneliness that came with raising children alone. It was in these quiet moments that David began to see the woman behind the CEO title. Later that afternoon, a power outage swept through the neighborhood again, plunging the house into semi-darkness. Rather than complain, Emily and David lit candles, and the four of them gathered in the living room. David pulled out an old board game, and soon the room was filled with laughter and friendly competition. Emily seemed genuinely happy, her earlier reserve replaced by warmth and ease. David noticed how naturally she fit into the rhythm of his small home, and for the first time, he realized how much he enjoyed her presence, not as a boss, but as a person. That night, after the children were asleep, Emily and David sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea. She looked around his modest home, her gaze lingering on the small details. The hand-drawn pictures on the fridge, the worn but comfortable furniture, the family photos on the wall. "You've built something beautiful here," she said softly. "It's not much," David replied, "but it's ours." Emily shook her head. "It's everything," she countered. For a moment, silence filled the space between them, but it wasn't awkward, it was comfortable, like they understood each other without needing more words. By the next morning, the roads were finally clear. The tow truck driver called to confirm he could pick up Emily's car. The children, now fast friends, groaned at the news of their parting. David loaded Emily's and Jacob's belongings into the trunk of his old pickup truck so he could drive them to where the tow truck would meet them. The air felt different, lighter than during the storm, but heavier in the sense that something meaningful was ending. Emily thanked David once more, but there was a depth in her voice that suggested she was saying more than just, "Thank you," for the shelter. A week later, David was at work when he received an unexpected call from HR, asking him to come to the executive office. His first thought was worry. Had something gone wrong? When he arrived, he was surprised to see Emily waiting for him, smiling. She invited him to sit down, then explained that she had been thinking a lot about the time they spent together during the storm. She spoke about the way he had treated her not as a CEO, but as a person in need, and how much that had meant to her. Then she slid an envelope across the desk. Inside was an offer for a promotion and a substantial raise. David was stunned. I don't know what to say," he stammered. Emily leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "You didn't just open your home, David. You opened your heart. That kind of kindness deserves to be recognized." She went on to explain that the new position would allow him to have more flexible hours, so he could spend more time with Lily while still advancing his career. David's gratitude was evident, but beyond the professional change, he realized that something deeper had shifted between them. Over the following months, Emily and David stayed in touch beyond work matters. Their children often asked to see each other, leading to shared picnics, park visits, and movie nights. The bond they had formed during the storm seemed to grow stronger with each passing week. Emily often remarked that the storm had been a strange kind of blessing, one that had brought them together in the most unexpected way. David agreed, realizing that sometimes life's harshest moments opened the door to the most meaningful connections. One quiet evening, months after that fateful night, David stood on his porch watching the sunset. Lily played in the yard with Jacob, their laughter echoing in the warm air. Emily stepped up beside him, holding 2 cups of tea. They exchanged a smile, one that spoke volumes about the journey they had taken since that stormy night. In the end, the experience wasn't just about shelter from the rain, it was about finding shelter in each other's company, and discovering that even in the most unexpected circumstances, lives can change forever.